Jake Morrison was having what could generously be called a weird Tuesday. One minute he was fixing a busted air conditioning unit on the International Space Station. The next minute he was standing in what looked like the galaxy's most pretentious courtroom, surrounded by creatures that belonged in a sci-fi movie with a really good special effects budget. The lead alien, who introduced himself as Ambassador Krell, looked like someone had crossed a gecko with a politician and then given the result a superiority complex. His scales shimmered with self-importance as he gestured grandly with 4 arms, each one dripping with what Jake assumed were very expensive alien accessories. "Human," Krell announced, his voice carrying that special tone reserved for people who think they're about to deliver earth-shattering wisdom. "You have been brought before the Galactic Council to understand your species' true place in this universe." Jake looked around at the assembled aliens. There was a nervous-looking bug creature that kept twitching its antennae, a rock-like being that seemed to be taking notes on a tablet made of crystal, and what appeared to be a sentient cloud of gas wearing a tiny hat. It was like the universe's most diverse jury, and Jake was pretty sure he hadn't committed any crimes. Well, except for that incident with the orbital debris. But that was totally an accident. "Okay," Jake said, pulling out his maintenance tablet and stylus. "Sounds educational. Should I be taking notes?" Krell's eyes widened, which was impressive considering they were already the size of dinner plates. "Notes? You think this is some kind of academic exercise? We are about to show you the most terrifying predators in the known galaxy. Creatures so fearsome that entire civilizations flee at the mere mention of their names." "Cool," Jake said, genuinely interested. He opened a new file on his tablet and titled it Alien Predators, Field Study. "Are we talking about behavioral patterns, hunting strategies, or more like a general overview of their ecological niches?" The bug creature, who Jake mentally nicknamed Twitchy, made a sound that might have been confusion or possibly indigestion. "It wishes to document its own terror. How peculiar. He clearly doesn't understand the gravity of the situation," Krell said, puffing up like an angry lizard. Which, Jake reflected, he basically was. "Very well, let us begin with something simple, something that will demonstrate the futility of human arrogance." The lights dimmed, and a holographic arena appeared in the center of the room. Jake leaned forward with the kind of interest usually reserved for nature documentaries, while the aliens settled back to watch what they clearly expected would be a psychological breakdown. "Behold," Krell intoned dramatically, "the creatures that rule the dark spaces between stars." Jake clicked his stylus ready and grinned. "This is going to be awesome." The first hologram materialized with all the dramatic flair of a magic show, complete with ominous lighting and what sounded like a death metal soundtrack. A creature that looked like smoke given murderous intent slithered into view, its form shifting between solid and vapor. "The Void Stalker," Krell announced with the reverence usually reserved for discussing natural disasters. "It phases through matter at will, making any defense useless. It can slip through the hull of a starship like it was made of paper." Jake watched the creature demonstrate by flowing through a holographic wall, then reforming on the other side with claws extended. "Oh, that's clever," he said, making notes. "Quantum phase shifting. And look at those claws. They maintain molecular cohesion during the transition. That's some serious evolutionary adaptation right there." The bug creature, Twitchy, vibrated with what might have been excitement. "See how it trembles with fear." "I'm not trembling, I'm impressed," Jake corrected, zooming in on the creature's anatomy with his tablet's camera function. "Does it hunt in packs or is it a solitary predator? And what does it eat?" "I'm assuming it needs to solidify to actually digest prey, unless it's got some kind of quantum stomach situation going on." Before anyone could answer, the second predator appeared. This one looked like someone had given a dragon anger management issues and then set it on fire, permanently. "The magma worm," Krell continued, his voice getting more frustrated. "It dwells in the cores of planets, emerging only to feed. Its body temperature exceeds 3,000 degrees. It turns everything it touches to ash and slag." The holographic worm demonstrated by melting through a series of increasingly exotic materials, each one vaporizing on contact. Jake watched with the fascination of someone discovering a new cooking technique. "Now that's interesting thermal regulation," he murmured, sketching the creature's heat distribution patterns. I bet it's got some kind of internal heat exchanger system. And look at that scale structure. It's probably using controlled thermal venting for propulsion. Very efficient design. You could probably use something like this for industrial applications like mining or metalworking. The rock creature made a grinding sound that might have been laughter or possibly the geological equivalent of a facepalm. The third predator was arguably the most unsettling. A chitinous queen the size of a small building, surrounded by a swirling cloud of what looked like flying razors with wings. "The swarm queen," Krell said, desperation creeping into his voice. "She commands billions of razor mites. Each one can strip flesh from bone in seconds. Her swarms have devoured entire worlds." Jake watched the demonstration with growing appreciation as the mites formed complex patterns, creating tactical formations that would make military strategists weep with envy. "Okay, that's just beautiful," he said, his stylus flying over the tablet screen. "Look at that coordination. She's running a real-time tactical network with billions of units. The processing power alone must be incredible. And the way they form defensive screens while maintaining offensive capability, that's textbook swarm intelligence optimization." The aliens exchanged glances that somehow managed to convey both confusion and growing concern. "The communication system must be fascinating," Jake continued. "Pheromones, electromagnetic signals, some kind of quantum entanglement network, and the logistics of feeding that many units while maintaining mobility. That's a masterclass in resource management right there." Krell's scales had gone from shimmering to sort of a dull, confused brown. "You are supposed to be terrified." "I am," Jake said cheerfully. "Terrified I won't get to study these properly. Do you have any behavioral footage, mating rituals, social hierarchies?" Jake's enthusiasm was apparently contagious, because even the normally stoic rock creature was leaning forward to see his notes. What had started as an intimidation session was rapidly turning into the galaxy's most unorthodox nature documentary. "Tell me about their hunting patterns," Jake said, looking up from his tablet with the eager expression of someone who'd just discovered their new favorite hobby. "The Void Stalker, for instance. Does it prefer ambush tactics or does it actively track prey? What's its success rate? And more importantly, what are its failure conditions?" Krell blinked slowly, like a computer trying to process an input it wasn't designed for. "Failure conditions?" "Sure," Jake said, as if this was the most obvious question in the galaxy. "Every predator has limitations. Energy costs for phase shifting must be enormous. I'm betting it can't maintain incorporeal form indefinitely. There's got to be a vulnerability window during the transition phases." The gas cloud with the tiny hat made a sound like steam escaping from a kettle. "The human analyzes the Void Stalker like prey studying a predator." "Well, yeah," Jake replied matter-of-factly. "That's how you understand any system. Input, output, constraints, and breaking points. The magma worm, for example. Sure, it's hot, but what about thermal shock? Rapid cooling would probably cause structural damage to its heat exchange organs. And all that internal heat has got to go somewhere. I'm betting it needs regular venting cycles." He sketched rapidly while talking, creating detailed diagrams of theoretical predator weaknesses that made the assembled aliens increasingly uncomfortable. "And the Swarm Queen," Jake continued, clearly warming to his subject. "She's got the classic centralized command problem. Take out the Queen, and you've got billions of confused units with no coordination. Plus, maintaining that level of psychic or biochemical control has to be metabolically expensive. She probably needs massive caloric intake and regular rest periods." Twitchy's antennae were twitching so fast they were practically vibrating. "This is not how terror is supposed to work." "Oh, I'm not terrified of them," Jake said with a grin that the aliens were starting to recognize as dangerous. "I'm terrified of the idea that someone might think these represent peak predator evolution. I mean, they're impressive for their respective ecological niches, but they're not exactly what you'd call versatile." He pulled up a new screen on his tablet and started creating comparison charts. "See, the thing about specialization is that it creates dependencies. The Void Stalker needs specific quantum field conditions to phase shift. The magma worm requires high-temperature environments to maintain its thermal systems. The Swarm Queen needs massive resources to support her population." "And this is bad?" the rock creature asked, its voice sounding like gravel in a cement mixer. Not bad, just limited, Jake explained patiently. A really effective predator needs adaptability, the ability to modify hunting strategies based on changing conditions, problem-solving capabilities, and most importantly, the ability to learn from failure and improve. He looked around at the assembled aliens with the kind of expression usually reserved for patient teachers dealing with particularly slow students. Also, none of these predators seemed to have developed tool use, technological augmentation, or cooperative hunting strategies with other species. That's a pretty significant evolutionary oversight. The silence that followed this observation was the kind usually associated with the moment when everyone realizes the iceberg is bigger than expected. Ambassador Krell had reached that special level of frustration usually reserved for customer service representatives dealing with people who insist on reading the terms and conditions. His scales had cycled through several colors and were now settling on what Jake was pretty sure was the alien equivalent of a stress rash. Clearly, Krell said, his voice tight with forced patience, you require a more significant demonstration. The holographic arena expanded, and the lighting shifted to something that would have made a horror movie director weep with artistic joy. Dramatic shadows danced across surfaces that hadn't existed a moment before, and the air itself seemed to thicken with anticipation. Behold, Krell intoned with the gravity of someone announcing the end of the world, the nightmare of Andromeda. What materialized in the center of the arena defied easy description. It was as if someone had taken every childhood fear, fed it steroids, and then given it anger management issues. The creature stood roughly 12 feet tall, with limbs that seemed to bend in directions that geometry hadn't invented yet. Its hide shifted between textures like liquid metal having an identity crisis, and it had way too many eyes that glowed with the kind of intelligence that suggested it knew exactly how much pain it could cause before you passed out. This creature, Krell continued, his voice rising with theatrical fervor, has never been defeated. It has consumed the military forces of 17 different civilizations. Entire star systems have been evacuated at the mere rumor of its presence. The nightmare demonstrated its capabilities with the casual efficiency of a professional showing off for the cameras. It moved with impossible speed, striking targets that appeared and vanished in microseconds. Its limbs extended and contracted like biological whips, each one capable of cutting through materials that Jake's tablet helpfully identified as being approximately 40 times stronger than diamond. Note the adaptive combat matrix, Jake murmured, his stylus flying across the screen. Those limbs are reconfiguring in real time based on target analysis. And look at that pattern recognition system. It's predicting threat vectors and adjusting its defensive posture accordingly. The creature paused mid-demonstration as if it had heard him. All of its many eyes focused on Jake with the kind of attention usually reserved for particularly interesting insects. It's beautiful, Jake said, and he genuinely meant it. Look at that cognitive processing speed. It's not just reacting, it's thinking 3 moves ahead. And the way it's analyzing my behavior patterns right now, that's genuine curiosity, not just predatory instinct. The assembled aliens had gone very quiet. Even Twitchy's antennae had stopped moving. The sensory integration alone must be incredible, Jake continued, apparently oblivious to the fact that the galaxy's most feared predator was studying him like a particularly complex puzzle. Multiple visual spectrums, probably electromagnetic field detection, chemical analysis, maybe even quantum state monitoring. This thing doesn't just hunt, it researches its prey. The nightmare tilted its head in what might have been confusion or possibly respect. And that adaptive physiology is just inspired design. Biological shape-shifting optimized for combat effectiveness. It's like evolution decided to build the perfect learning machine and then gave it claws. Jake looked up from his tablet to find every creature in the room staring at him with expressions that ranged from bewildered to actively concerned. "What?" he asked innocently. "It's a magnificent specimen." The silence that followed Jake's enthusiastic review of the galaxy's most feared predator was the kind that usually accompanies the realization that someone has fundamentally misunderstood the assignment. Magnificent specimen, Krell repeated slowly, as if the words were in a language he'd never heard before. You just called the Nightmare of Andromeda a magnificent specimen. Well, yeah, Jake said, looking genuinely confused by their confusion. I mean, from a purely evolutionary standpoint, it's impressive work, but it's not exactly what you'd call a perfect predator. There are some pretty obvious design flaws. The rock creature made a sound like an avalanche having an existential crisis. Design flaws? Jake pulled up his analysis on the tablet and turned it so everyone could see. Sure. Look, it's obviously optimized for single-target elimination in controlled environments. But what happens when it encounters persistence predators? Or pack hunters? Or prey that's adapted specifically to counter its advantages? He pointed to his behavioral diagrams with the enthusiasm of someone explaining why their favorite sports team was going to win the championship. See, it's got the classic super predator problem. It's so specialized for being the ultimate threat that it's never had to develop adaptive strategies for dealing with prey that doesn't follow standard threat response patterns. The nightmare itself was still watching Jake with what might have been fascination. Or possibly it was trying to figure out if he was having some kind of mental breakdown. Plus, Jake continued, warming to his subject, it's clearly a reactive hunter. It responds to threats and opportunities, but it doesn't create them. A really effective predator doesn't just adapt to the environment, it modifies the environment to its advantage. He scrolled through his notes, showing behavioral pattern analyses that made the assembled aliens increasingly uncomfortable. And look at this energy expenditure model. All that shape-shifting and high-speed combat must be metabolically expensive. I'm betting it needs significant recovery time between hunts. That's a huge vulnerability right there. Twitchy made a sound that might have been the insectoid equivalent of hyperventilating. It speaks of the nightmare's vulnerabilities as if they were obvious. They kind of are, Jake said apologetically. I mean, it's a remarkable achievement for its evolutionary niche, but it's still operating on basic predator-prey dynamics. It's reactive, not proactive. It hunts, but it doesn't strategize. It adapts, but it doesn't innovate. He looked around at the assembled aliens with the patient expression of someone trying to explain a simple concept to particularly dense students. A truly effective predator doesn't just kill efficiently. It eliminates competition, modifies environments to create hunting advantages, and develops tools and techniques that transcend biological limitations. This guy is impressive, but he's still operating on biological instincts. The gas cloud with the tiny hat made a sound like a whistling tea kettle. What manner of predator does your species consider truly effective? Jake's grin was the kind that should have come with warning labels. Oh, you want to see effective predation? Let me show you what we consider a decent hunting strategy. Jake's tablet lit up with the kind of cheerful enthusiasm usually reserved for vacation slideshows, except instead of boring family photos, he was pulling up what appeared to be a comprehensive documentary library titled Earth's Most Successful Killers, a Comprehensive Guide. Okay, he said, settling into presentation mode with the comfortable ease of someone who'd clearly done this before. Let's start with something basic. This is a great white shark. The holographic display showed a sleek predator cutting through blue water with the kind of effortless grace that spoke to millions of years of evolutionary refinement. Now, this is what I call practical design, Jake narrated while the shark demonstrated its hunting technique. No shape-shifting, no quantum phasing, just perfect hydrodynamic engineering and a bite force of 4,000 pounds per square inch. It's been essentially unchanged for 400 million years because it doesn't need to be changed. Perfect predator for its environment. The aliens watched with growing unease as the shark efficiently dispatched various prey items with mechanical precision. But here's where it gets interesting, Jake continued, swiping to the next video. This is a grizzly bear. Notice how it's adapted for multiple hunting strategies. Fish, small mammals, vegetation, honey. Basically whatever's available. It doesn't specialize in one prey type. It adapts its hunting strategy to seasonal opportunities. The bear demonstration was followed by wolves working in coordinated packs, crocodiles using patience as a weapon, and octopi solving complex problems to reach their prey. See the pattern? Jake asked, looking around at his increasingly nervous audience. Earth's predators don't rely on being the biggest or the scariest. They rely on being adaptable, efficient, and above all, intelligent. He paused the presentation and looked directly at Ambassador Krell. But you want to see a really effective predator? Let me show you the species that turned hunting into an art form. The new hologram showed a group of early humans on an African savanna, and Jake's voice took on the tone of a nature documentarian who'd discovered something genuinely remarkable. Homo sapiens, he announced, also known as persistence predators. Now, they're not particularly fast, not especially strong, no natural weapons to speak of. But watch what they do. The hologram showed the humans beginning to track a large antelope, following it at a steady jog while the animal bounded away at high speed. They're not trying to catch it, Jake explained. They're trying to tire it out. See, humans evolved the best endurance running system on the planet. They can maintain a steady pace for hours while their prey exhausts itself with short bursts of speed. The demonstration continued as the humans maintained their relentless pursuit, the antelope growing visibly tired while the humans looked like they could keep going indefinitely. But here's the really clever part, Jake said, his enthusiasm reaching dangerous levels. They're not just running. They're thinking, planning, coordinating. When the antelope changes direction, they don't all follow. Some take shortcuts. They're predicting where it will go and cutting off its options. The inevitable conclusion played out as the exhausted antelope finally collapsed, surrounded by humans who looked like they'd just finished a pleasant morning jog. Persistence hunting, Jake announced proudly. Also known as the reason why most of Earth's megafauna went extinct shortly after humans figured out how to make sharp sticks. The silence in the chamber was deafening. But wait, Jake said with the dangerous cheer of someone who clearly had more to share. There's more. See, humans didn't stop at persistence hunting. They developed tools, weapons, and then they did something really special. They started hunting other predators. New holograms showed human development through the ages, stone tools becoming metal weapons, individual hunters becoming organized armies, simple tactics evolving into complex strategies. Agriculture, civilization, technology, Jake narrated as the images flowed past. Humans didn't just adapt to their environment, they rebuilt it. They didn't just hunt animals, they domesticated them. They turned their competitors into livestock and their rivals into resources. The final image showed a modern human city, sprawling across the landscape like a vast organism. And the best part, Jake concluded with obvious pride, is that they never stopped hunting. They just expanded their definition of prey to include abstract concepts like problems, challenges, and the fundamental forces of the universe. He closed the tablet and looked around at the assembled aliens with a cheerful smile. So when you talk about apex predators, just remember that Earth has a species that looked at every other predator on the planet and said, "That's cute, but have you tried teamwork and opposable thumbs?" The gas cloud made a sound like a deflating balloon. Twitchy's antennae had gone completely still. The rock creature appeared to be taking very detailed notes. Ambassador Krell had turned a color that Jake was pretty sure wasn't healthy for reptilian species. "I think," Krell said carefully, "that we may have made an error in our assessment of human capabilities." "Oh, don't worry about it," Jake said magnanimously. "Happens to everyone. So, about that cultural exchange program I mentioned. I've got some ideas about improving your predator effectiveness ratings, and I bet Earth's xenobiologists would love to study your guys. Win-win situation, right?" The nightmare of Andromeda, still watching from the holographic arena, made a sound that might have been laughter, or possibly the alien equivalent of, "I want to go home now." 3 months later, Jake Morrison's business card read, Galactic Predator Consultant and Interspecies Threat Assessment Specialist. His first official recommendation to the Galactic Council was a single-line update to Earth's diplomatic status. Approach with caution. Recommend friendship. Do not provoke. The nightmare of Andromeda had reportedly requested a transfer to a different galaxy. Something about the local predators being unsettlingly enthusiastic about professional development.